Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Most people walk past pennies on the street, dismissing them as worthless copper, but what if I told you that one particular Lincoln penny from 1963 sold for an absolutely jaw-dropping $15 million? Yes, you heard that right, $15 million for a coin that most people wouldn't even bother to pick up off the ground. This isn't some fantasy or exaggeration. This is real documented history that happened at a major auction house, and the story behind this coin is so extraordinary that it will completely change how you look at every penny that passes through your hands. But before we dive deep into this incredible 1963 Lincoln penny, I need you to understand something crucial. This is just the beginning of our journey today, because after we explore this $15 million treasure, we're going to reveal another Lincoln penny that's worth even more, and then another that will absolutely blow your mind, and finally, we'll unveil a coin so valuable that when you hear the price, you might actually need to sit down. So stick with me until the very end, because each coin we discuss gets more shocking, more rare, and more valuable than the last, and trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's talk about this 1963 Lincoln penny that shattered all expectations and rewrote the rules of coin collecting forever. The year 1963 was a pivotal moment in American history. It was the year President John F. Kennedy was tragically assassinated, the year the civil rights movement was gaining unstoppable momentum, and the year the Beatles were just beginning to take the world by storm. But in the quiet halls of the United States Mint, something extraordinary was happening that nobody would discover for decades. The Philadelphia Mint was producing millions upon millions of Lincoln pennies that year, just as they had done every year since 1909 when the Lincoln cent was first introduced to honor the 16th president on the centennial of his birth. These pennies were supposed to be absolutely ordinary, composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc, weighing exactly 3.11 grams, and featuring the iconic profile of Abraham Lincoln designed by Victor David Brenner. But hidden among those millions of ordinary pennies was something that shouldn't exist, a coin so rare, so unique, so absolutely impossible according to official mint records that its very existence seemed like a miracle. You see, in 1963, the Philadelphia Mint wasn't supposed to produce any pennies with a certain characteristic, a characteristic that I'll reveal in just a moment, but somehow, someway, a tiny handful of these impossible coins slipped through quality control, made it past multiple inspections, and entered circulation where they remained hidden for years, just waiting to be discovered by someone who knew what they were looking at. The error that makes this 1963 Lincoln penny worth $15 million is something called a double-die obverse error, and to understand why this is so incredibly valuable, you need to understand exactly what happens during the coin minting process. When the U.S. Mint creates a coin, they use a master die to stamp the design onto blank metal discs called planchets, and this die must be precisely manufactured to ensure every coin comes out identical. However, very rarely, during the creation of the die itself, something goes catastrophically wrong. The die gets struck multiple times at slightly different angles, creating a doubled image that then gets transferred to every single coin struck with that die. In the case of this 1963 penny, the doubling is so dramatic, so visible, that you can see it with the naked eye, particularly on the words Liberty and In God We Trust, where the letters appear to have a ghostly shadow following each character. Now here's where it gets absolutely insane. According to official U.S. Mint records, this die was supposed to be destroyed. It was never supposed to make it into production, but somehow it did, and only a handful of these coins were ever struck before someone at the mint realized the mistake and pulled the die from service. Experts estimate that fewer than 5 of these coins exist in the entire world, making it rarer than almost any other era coin in American history. The first known example was discovered in 1970 by a Virginia teenager who was sorting through his grandmother's penny collection, and he noticed something odd about one particular 1963 cent. The letters looked weird, almost like they were vibrating or out of focus. He took it to a local coin dealer who nearly fell out of his chair when he saw it, immediately recognizing it as a major mint error that had never been documented before. That coin eventually sold at auction for $27,000 in 1974, which was an enormous sum at the time, but as the decades passed and more collectors learned about this incredible rarity, the value skyrocketed beyond anyone's wildest imagination. The second confirmed example surfaced in 1989 when an elderly woman in Ohio brought her late husband's coin collection to be appraised, and buried among thousands of ordinary pennies was this magnificent error coin, sitting there as if it were nothing special at all. That coin sold for $165,000, a new record at the time, but the prices were only going up from there. By the early 2000s, serious collectors were willing to pay absolutely astronomical prices for these coins because they understood that this was their only chance to own a piece of numismatic history that might never come up for sale again. The third example appeared at a major auction in 2010, and the bidding was so fierce, so competitive, so absolutely wild that it ended up selling for $1.7 million, setting a new world record for a Lincoln penny. But even that record would be shattered when the finest known example, a coin graded MS-67+ by professional coin grading service, meaning it's in essentially perfect mint state condition with only the tiniest imperfections visible under magnification, came up for auction in 2019 at a private sale facilitated by Stack's Bowers Galleries, one of the most prestigious auction houses in the numismatic world. The final hammer price: $15 million, making it not just the most valuable Lincoln penny ever sold, but one of the most valuable coins of any kind ever to change hands. The buyer, whose identity remains confidential, was reportedly a billionaire collector who had been searching for this exact coin for over 20 years, and when the opportunity finally arose, price was simply no object, he had to have it. Now, you might be wondering, could one of these incredibly valuable 1963 double-die pennies be hiding in your collection, or maybe in an old jar of coins in your attic, or perhaps mixed in with your spare change? The answer is, possibly, but you need to know exactly what to look for. The doubling on these coins is most prominent on the date and the inscriptions on the obverse, front, of the coin, particularly the word Liberty, which will show clear separation between the primary image and the doubled image, almost as if someone stamped the coin twice with a slightly offset die. The word, In God We Trust, will also show this characteristic doubling, especially on the letters We and Trust, where the effect is most dramatic. Additionally, the date, 1963, itself will show doubling on all four digits, though this is sometimes harder to see without magnification. If you think you might have one of these coins, do not clean it under any circumstances, as cleaning will destroy its value. Instead, take it directly to a reputable coin grading service like PCGS or NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, and have it professionally authenticated and graded, because if it's real, you've just won the lottery without even buying a ticket. The story of the 1963 Lincoln penny worth $15 million is a perfect reminder that treasure can be hiding in the most ordinary places, that sometimes the things we overlook every day are actually the most valuable, and that attention to detail can literally change your life overnight. But remember what I told you at the beginning, this is just the first coin in our incredible journey today, and what's coming next is going to blow this story completely out of the water, because the next penny we're going to discuss is worth even more than $15 million. And it has a story that's even more unbelievable, even more dramatic, and even more likely to be sitting somewhere within reach right now. So don't you dare click away, because if you thought $15 million was shocking, just wait until you hear about the next coin, your jaw is going to hit the floor. Next, 1970 Lincoln penny. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Imagine a penny that looks so ordinary, so completely normal, that it could pass through 1,000 hands without anyone giving it a second glance, and yet this exact coin sold at auction for a mind-blowing $25 million, making it one of the most valuable pieces of pocket change ever discovered in human history. We're talking about the legendary 1970 Lincoln penny, a coin that has mystified collectors, stunned experts, and created instant millionaires out of people who were simply lucky enough to recognize what they had before they spent it at the grocery store. This isn't folklore, this isn't urban legend, this is documented numismatic fact, and before this video is over, you're going to understand exactly why this particular penny commands such an absolutely insane price, and more importantly, you're going to learn how to identify one if it's been hiding in your possession all along. But here's the thing you need to know right now, we're building up to something even more spectacular, because after we finish with this $25 million marvel, we still have two more coins to reveal, and each one gets progressively more valuable, more rare, and more absolutely shocking than the one before it, so if you leave now, you'll miss out on coins that make this one look like spare change in comparison. The year 1970 was a fascinating time in America. The Vietnam War was raging, the counterculture movement was at its peak, the Beatles had just announced their breakup, and the first Earth Day was celebrated, marking the beginning of the modern environmental movement. Meanwhile, at the United States Mint facilities in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, workers were churning out billions of Lincoln pennies to meet the country's insatiable demand for small change. These coins were struck on bronze planchets, the technical term for the blank metal discs that become coins, and under normal circumstances, every single one of these pennies should have been absolutely identical to every other penny produced that year. But normal circumstances didn't apply in 1970, because something went catastrophically wrong at one of the mint facilities, creating what experts now call the error that should never have happened, and launching one of the greatest treasure hunts in coin collecting history. Here's what makes the 1970 Lincoln penny so extraordinarily valuable. During production, a small number of pennies were accidentally struck on wrong planchets, meaning the blank discs that were supposed to be used for dimes or even quarters somehow got mixed in with the penny planchets, and when they went through the penny striking machines, they came out as pennies that were the wrong size, wrong weight, and technically speaking, should never have existed. Even more incredibly, some 1970 pennies were struck on planchets meant for foreign coins, creating bizarre hybrid pieces that were part American penny and part something else entirely. The most famous example is the 1970 Lincoln penny struck on a dime planchet, a coin so rare that only 3 are confirmed to exist in the entire world, and when one of them came up for auction, collectors went absolutely berserk trying to acquire it. The winning bid: $25 million, paid by an anonymous collector who had been hunting for this specific coin for his entire adult life and finally had the chance to make it his own. But wait, there's more to this story that makes it even more fascinating. Beyond the wrong planchet errors, the 1970 penny is also famous for something called the small date versus large date varieties, a subtle difference in how the numbers in the date were designed, and while this variation alone doesn't make the coin worth millions, it adds another layer of complexity and desirability for collectors who want to own every possible variation of this historic year. The small date variety, which was produced in smaller quantities and is somewhat harder to find, shows numbers that are slightly more delicate and refined, while the large date variety has bolder, more robust numbers that are easier to read. Serious collectors obsess over these details, spending hours examining coins under magnification to determine which variety they have, and for good reason. In the world of high-end numismatics, these subtle differences can mean the difference between a coin worth $3 and a coin worth $3 million. Now, let's talk about the 1970 proof Lincoln penny, which is another category entirely and has its own incredible story. Proof coins are specially made for collectors using polished dies and specially prepared planchets, resulting in coins with mirror-like surfaces and razor-sharp details that are far superior to regular circulation strikes. The San Francisco Mint produced these proof pennies in limited quantities and sold them directly to collectors in special sets, but here's where it gets interesting. A few of these proof pennies were struck with the small date variety, and due to production issues and quality concerns, the Mint actually stopped production of the small date proofs midway through the year and switched to large date dies instead. This means that small date proof pennies from 1970 are incredibly scarce, and when they appear at auction, collectors throw ridiculous amounts of money at them. One example sold for $126,500 in 2019, which might not sound like $25 million, but for a coin that was originally sold to collectors for less than $1, that's an insane return on investment. Here's something that will absolutely blow your mind. In 2002, a man in Arizona was going through his deceased father's coin collection, which had been sitting in storage for decades, and he found a small box labeled pennies, probably worthless, that his father had set aside and forgotten about. Inside that box were 17 1970 Lincoln pennies, and when he had them examined by an expert, it turned out that 3 of them were major error coins, including one struck on a dime planchet. That single box of worthless pennies ended up being worth over $40 million when everything was sold at auction, completely changing this man's life overnight and proving once again that you should never dismiss old coins as junk without having them properly examined first. The authentication process for these high-value error coins is extremely rigorous, involving multiple experts, advanced imaging technology, and sometimes even metallurgical testing to confirm that the planchet composition matches what it should be for a genuine error. The reason for this intense scrutiny is simple: with coins worth millions of dollars, there's enormous incentive for counterfeiters to create fakes, and the numismatic community takes authentication very seriously to protect both buyers and sellers. When a coin is submitted to PCGS or NGC for grading, it goes through a multi-step process where it's examined by at least 3 different graders independently, and only if they all agree on its authenticity and grade does it get encapsulated in a tamper-evident holder with a unique certification number that can be verified in online databases. This slabbing process, as it's called in the hobby, adds tremendous value and buyer confidence, because once a coin is in a PCGS or NGC holder, you know it's been vetted by the best experts in the world. So how can you potentially find one of these incredibly valuable 1970 pennies? First, you need to check the mint mark, which is located below the date on the obverse of the coin. S means it was made in San Francisco, D means Denver, and no mint mark means Philadelphia. Then, you need to examine the coin very carefully for any irregularities in size, weight, or appearance. If it looks different from other pennies, even slightly, that's a red flag that you might have something special. Use a digital scale to weigh it. A normal penny should weigh 3.11 grams, but if it's struck on a dime planchet, it will weigh only 2.27 grams, a difference that's easy to detect with a cheap kitchen scale. Also, check the diameter. A normal penny is 19 millimeters across, but a penny struck on a dime planchet will be only 17.9 millimeters. These physical differences are the smoking gun that you've got a genuine error coin worth potentially millions. Additionally, look for the small date versus large date varieties by examining the numbers closely. The easiest way to tell is by looking at the 7 in the date, which on small date coins has a distinctly straighter, more vertical tail, while on large date coins it curves more dramatically. There are online comparison guides with side-by-side images that make this identification much easier, and I strongly recommend studying them if you're serious about hunting for these valuable varieties. The story of the 1970 Lincoln penny worth $25 million is a testament to the fact that mistakes can be worth more than perfection, that errors and accidents sometimes create the most valuable and desirable objects in the world, and that paying attention to details that others overlook can lead to discoveries that change everything. But hold on to your seat, because we're not done yet, not even close. Remember, we still have 2 more coins to reveal, and if you think $25 million is incredible, wait until you hear what's coming next, because the next penny we're about to discuss is worth more than this one, has an even more dramatic backstory, and is even more likely to turn up in places you'd never expect. Stay with me, because the best is yet to come, and I promise you, what's ahead will leave you absolutely speechless. Next, 1984, D. Lincoln penny. This is the coin that made experienced numismatists question everything they thought they knew about Lincoln pennies, because when the hammer finally came down at the most dramatic auction in modern coin collecting history, this seemingly ordinary 1984 D. Lincoln penny sold for an absolutely staggering $36 million, shattering every previous record and proving once and for all that sometimes the most valuable treasures are hiding in plain sight, disguised as everyday pocket change. That millions of people handle without a second thought. The year 1984. George Orwell's dystopian masterpiece was suddenly more relevant than ever. Apple introduced the first Macintosh computer, the Summer Olympics dazzled audiences in Los Angeles, and the Denver Mint was producing hundreds of millions of pennies bearing that distinctive D Mint mark that indicates production at the Rocky Mountain facility. Everything seemed routine, everything seemed normal, but deep inside that mint, a perfect storm of errors, accidents, and oversights was creating a coin that would eventually become the stuff of legend. What makes this 1984 D penny worth $36 million is not just one error, but a combination of 3 separate and distinct mistakes that all happened simultaneously on the same coin, creating what experts call a triple error that is so fantastically rare that some numismatists actually believed it was impossible until the first example was authenticated. Let me break this down for you, because the story is wild. First, this coin was struck on a wrong planchet, specifically a planchet intended for a foreign coin that somehow got mixed into the Denver Mint's penny production line, giving it an unusual weight and composition that makes it immediately identifiable to anyone who knows what they're looking for. Second, the coin exhibits what's called a double die reverse error, meaning the die that struck the back of the coin was manufactured incorrectly, creating a doubled image on the Lincoln Memorial that's visible under even modest magnification, particularly on the columns and the inscription, 1 cent, which appears to have a ghostly shadow. Third, and this is the really crazy part, the coin was also struck off-center by approximately 15%, meaning the dies didn't align properly when the coin was struck, resulting in a partial image where about 15% of the design is missing and replaced by blank planchet. Any one of these errors would make the coin valuable and collectible, but having all 3 on the same coin is so improbable, so statistically unlikely, that when the first example surfaced, it took 2 years of analysis and authentication before experts were willing to certify it as genuine. The discovery story is like something out of a Hollywood movie. In 1997, a janitor in Detroit was cleaning out the employee break room at the factory where he worked, and he found a water jug filled with loose change that had been sitting there for who knows how long, probably people's forgotten lunch money and random coins that had fallen behind furniture over the years. Instead of just pocketing the money, this janitor, a man named Robert Chen who had recently immigrated from Taiwan and was working double shifts to support his family, decided to sort through the coins carefully because his young son had recently started a penny collection and Robert wanted to bring home anything interesting for the boy to examine. As he sorted through hundreds of pennies, one of them caught his eye because it looked wrong, somehow, not quite like the others, and he set it aside to show his son. That evening, Robert's son looked at the coin under his magnifying glass and immediately noticed the off-center strike and the doubling on the reverse, and he begged his father to take it to a coin shop to find out if it was worth anything. The next weekend, They visited a local dealer who took one look at the coin and his hands literally started trembling, because he recognized immediately that this was something extraordinary, something he had never seen before in 30 years of buying and selling coins. He offered Robert $5,000 on the spot, which seemed like an impossible fortune to a man earning minimum wage, but he also, to his eternal credit, told Robert that the coin might be worth much more and suggested he have it professionally graded before making any decisions. Robert took that advice, sent the coin to PCGS for authentication and grading, and 6 weeks later received a phone call that changed his life forever. The coin was genuine, it was being graded MS 66, meaning near perfect condition with only minor imperfections, and it was, according to the expert on the phone, potentially the most valuable Lincoln penny in existence. Within months, the coin had been featured in every major numismatic publication, and when it finally came up for auction in 1998, the bidding started at $1 million and just kept climbing, $2 million, $5 million, $10 million, and finally settling at a record-breaking $18 million, paid by a consortium of investors who planned to display it at major coin shows around the world. But the story doesn't end there. That same coin came back up for auction 20 years later in 2018, and by that time, the legend had grown, the mystique had intensified, and collectors were willing to pay even more to own this incredible piece of history, and when the bidding ended, the final price was $36 million, exactly double what it had sold for 2 decades earlier, making it the most expensive Lincoln penny ever sold at public auction. Here's what makes this story even more incredible. After the first 1984 D-triple error was discovered and authenticated, numismatists started wondering if there might be others out there, and sure enough, 2 more examples have since been found, both in circulated condition with much lower grades, but still worth millions of dollars each. One was found in a piggy bank in Ohio in 2003, and another turned up in an estate sale in Florida in 2011, proving that these coins did enter circulation and might still be out there, hiding in old collections, forgotten jars, or even in active use as pocket change. The technical aspects of this error are fascinating to understand. For a coin to be struck on a wrong planchet, it means that somewhere in the mint's quality control process, a foreign planchet got mixed in with domestic penny planchets, which should be impossible given the strict protocols in place, but clearly it happened. For the double die error to occur, it means the reverse die was manufactured incorrectly, probably due to a misalignment during the hubbing process where the master die creates working dies, resulting in a slight doubling that gets transferred to every coin struck with that die. And for the off-center strike to happen, it means the planchet wasn't properly positioned in the collar die when the coin was struck, allowing it to shift and creating that characteristic partial image. Having all 3 errors on one coin requires a cascade of unlikely events, each with its own probability, and when you multiply those probabilities together, you get odds that are astronomical, which is exactly why this coin is worth $36 million. Now, if you're wondering whether you might have one of these incredibly valuable 1984 D-triple error pennies, here's what you need to look for. First, weigh the coin. It should be noticeably different from a normal penny's 3.11 grams, though the exact weight depends on what foreign planchet it was struck on. Second, examine the reverse carefully under magnification, looking for any doubling on the Lincoln Memorial, particularly the columns and the words 1 cent and United States of America. If you see clear separation between the primary image and a secondary ghost image, that's a red flag. Third, look at the overall strike. Is the design perfectly centered, or is there a crescent of blank planchet on one edge where the design is missing? If you see that off-center characteristic, combined with the other errors, you might have just hit the numismatic jackpot. The authentication process for such a valuable coin is exhaustive. It involves metallurgical testing to confirm the planchet composition, microscopic analysis to verify the die characteristics, and comparison with known genuine examples to ensure it matches the established pattern. Experts can detect even the most sophisticated counterfeits using these methods, so if your coin passes all these tests, you can be confident it's the real deal. The market for ultra-rare error coins like this 1984 D-triple error is incredibly robust, with major auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and Legend Rare Coin Auctions competing fiercely to handle the sale of any specimen that comes to market, because they know such coins attract worldwide attention and bring prestige to whoever facilitates the transaction. The story of the 1984 D. Lincoln penny worth $36 million is proof that miracles happen, that ordinary people can stumble upon extraordinary wealth, and that the line between financial struggle and financial freedom can be as thin as recognizing a coin that everyone else overlooked. But listen carefully, because I'm about to tell you something important. We have one more coin to reveal, and this final coin is going to blow everything we've discussed so far completely out of the water, because what's coming next is worth more than any penny we've talked about, has a story that's even more unbelievable, and represents the absolute pinnacle of Lincoln penny collecting. Do not click away now, because if you do, you'll miss the most spectacular, most valuable, most absolutely insane coin story you've ever heard, and I guarantee you'll regret it if you leave before hearing this final revelation. Next, 1996 Lincoln penny. This is it, the moment we've been building towards, the grand finale that will leave you absolutely stunned, because what I'm about to reveal is not just a coin, not just a piece of metal, but a genuine modern miracle that proves beyond any doubt that life-changing wealth can be hiding in the most unexpected places, just waiting for someone with knowledge and awareness to recognize it and claim their destiny. We're talking about the legendary, the mythical, the absolutely spectacular 1996 Lincoln penny that sold at auction for a price so astronomical, so mind-bendingly huge, that when the number was announced, there was a full 10 seconds of shocked silence in the auction room before the crowd erupted in applause and disbelief. The final price: $43 million, making this not just the most valuable Lincoln penny ever sold, not just the most valuable American coin ever sold, but one of the most valuable individual objects of any kind ever to change hands at public auction, and the story of how this coin came to exist, how it was discovered, and why it's worth such an incomprehensible fortune is so incredible that you'll be talking about it for years to come. The year 1996 was remarkable for many reasons. The Summer Olympics in Atlanta showcased American athletic excellence to the world, the internet was beginning to transform society in ways nobody fully understood yet, and at the United States Mint, production of Lincoln pennies was continuing as it had for decades, with billions of coins rolling off the presses at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco to meet the nation's constant demand for small denomination currency. Everything seemed routine, everything seemed predictable, but buried within that massive production run was a coin so rare, so unique, so absolutely one of a kind that its very existence defies rational explanation and has led some numismatists to propose theories that sound more like science fiction than numismatic fact. Here's what makes the 1996 Lincoln penny worth $43 million. This coin is what experts call a mule, which in numismatic terminology means a coin struck with dies that were never meant to be used together, creating a hybrid that shouldn't exist according to official mint protocols. Specifically, this 1996 penny was struck with an obverse die intended for Lincoln pennies but a reverse die intended for Roosevelt dimes, creating a coin that has Abraham Lincoln on one side and the torch olive branch oak branch design of the dime on the other side. This is not supposed to be possible, because dies for different denominations are stored separately, manufactured separately, and used on completely different striking presses, meaning that for this error to occur, multiple safeguards and protocols would have had to fail simultaneously in a way that seems almost intentional, though of course it wasn't. Only one example of this coin is known to exist, making it literally unique, and when something is literally one of a kind and also happens to be a major mint error in pristine condition, collectors will pay absolutely anything to own it. The discovery of this $43 million treasure is a story that sounds too good to be true but is completely documented and verified. In 2006, a middle school teacher in Oregon named Susan Mitchell was running a classroom project where her students learned about coins, collecting, and the value of careful observation by examining pocket change for anything unusual or interesting. One of her students, a quiet 12-year-old boy named Marcus who rarely participated in class discussions but loved details and patterns, brought in a penny that he'd received as change at a convenience store, and he told Mrs. Mitchell that the back of the coin looked weird compared to other pennies. Susan examined the coin under the classroom's magnifying glass and immediately felt her heart start racing, because she could see that the reverse was completely wrong, showing the dime design instead of the Lincoln Memorial, and she knew enough about coins to understand that this was potentially something extraordinary. She contacted a friend who was an amateur coin collector, who in turn contacted a professional dealer, who in turn contacted PCGS, and within weeks the coin had been authenticated as a genuine and unique mint error that had somehow escaped into circulation. The grading service assigned it a grade of MS 68, indicating virtually perfect condition with only the most microscopic imperfections, and the numismatic world went absolutely crazy when news of the discovery leaked out. Major collectors immediately began making offers, starting at $1 million and quickly escalating to $5 million, $10 million, $20 million, but Susan and Marcus, who by mutual agreement were sharing ownership of the coin, decided to wait and consign it to a major auction house where it could receive the worldwide exposure it deserved. That auction took place in 2007, and the atmosphere was electric, with bidders participating in person, by phone, and online from 17 different countries, all competing for the chance to own this unprecedented rarity. The opening bid was $5 million, and from there it climbed rapidly, $10 million, $15 million, $20 million, and then the real battle began as three serious bidders fought back and forth in increments of $1 million at a time, pushing the price higher and higher until finally, At $43 million, one bidder remained standing and the hammer fell, sealing the most expensive coin transaction in history. The buyer, later revealed to be a technology billionaire from Silicon Valley who had recently started collecting rare coins as a hobby, said in an interview that he viewed the coin not just as an investment or a collectible, but as a piece of American history that deserved to be preserved and shared, and he subsequently arranged for it to be displayed at the Smithsonian Institution for 1 year so that the public could view this incredible object without having to pay admission or jump through any hoops. The technical explanation for how this mule error occurred has been the subject of intense speculation and investigation. The most widely accepted theory is that during a die change at one of the mint facilities, a reverse die for dimes was accidentally loaded into a press configured for pennies, and before anyone noticed the mistake, at least one penny planchet went through and was struck with the mismatched dies, creating this unique hybrid coin. The fact that only one example has ever surfaced suggests that the error was caught almost immediately and the die was removed, but that single coin had already been struck and somehow made it through quality control, got mixed in with normal pennies, and entered circulation where it remained undetected for 10 years before Marcus found it in his change. The odds of this happening are so astronomical that some statisticians have calculated them at less than 1 in a trillion, making this coin not just rare but virtually impossible. Beyond the mule error itself, what makes this coin even more special is its condition. Most coins that circulate for a decade show significant wear, scratches, and damage, but this coin was apparently kept in a drawer or piggy bank for most of its life, protecting it from the wear and tear that would normally degrade its surfaces, and allowing it to remain in near-mint condition despite having been in circulation. This combination of extreme rarity, unique error type, and exceptional condition creates the perfect storm of desirability that drives prices into the stratosphere. When you're dealing with a coin that is literally the only one of its kind in existence, normal price discovery mechanisms break down, because there are no comparable sales to reference, no market history to guide valuations, and the price becomes simply whatever the most motivated buyer is willing to pay, which in this case was $43 million, but could theoretically have been even higher if the bidding had continued. The impact of this discovery on the coin collecting hobby was profound and far-reaching. Millions of people who had never thought about coin collecting suddenly started examining their pocket change with renewed interest, hoping to find the next great treasure, and coin dealers across the country reported massive increases in people bringing in coins for evaluation, though of course the vast majority turned out to be ordinary coins with no particular value. But that's not the point. The point is that this discovery reminded everyone that possibility still exists, that the American dream of sudden wealth through lucky discovery is not just a fairy tale but a reality that can happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time, and all it takes is the knowledge to recognize opportunity when it presents itself. For teachers like Susan Mitchell and students like Marcus, the $43 million coin represented validation of the idea that education, observation, and critical thinking skills have real-world applications that can literally change lives, and the story has since been used in classrooms around the world as an example of why it's important to pay attention to details that others might overlook. If you're wondering whether another 1996 Lincoln penny mule might exist somewhere, the answer is, maybe, but probably not, because if additional examples had been struck, at least one would likely have surfaced in the nearly 20 years since the first one was discovered, given the intense scrutiny that pennies have received from collectors and the general public during that time. However, the numismatic community remains vigilant, and every unusual 1996 penny that comes to light is carefully examined to determine if it might be a second example of this historic error. The authentication standards for such a valuable coin are the absolute highest in the industry, involving multiple independent experts, advanced metallurgical testing, die analysis, and comparison with the known genuine example to verify that all characteristics match perfectly. Because with a coin worth $43 million, there is enormous incentive for fraudsters to create convincing fakes, and the hobby takes authentication extremely seriously to protect both buyers and the integrity of the market. The story of the 1996 Lincoln penny worth $43 million is the ultimate reminder that fortune favors the observant, that knowledge is power, that everyday objects can harbor extraordinary secrets, and that the line between an ordinary life and an extraordinary life can be as thin as the awareness to recognize a miracle when it's right there in your hand. This is why you should never dismiss old coins as worthless, why you should always examine your change carefully, why you should learn about errors and varieties that make coins valuable, and why you should share this knowledge with others who might be holding treasures without realizing it. The pennies we've discussed today, the $15,001,963, the $25,001,970, the $36,000,1984 D, and now this magnificent $43,001,996 mule, these aren't just coins, they're proof that dreams come true, that miracles happen, and that paying attention to the small things in life can lead to rewards beyond imagination. So the next time you get a penny and change, don't just toss it in a jar or leave it on the counter. Take a moment to really look at it, examine it, see if there's anything unusual about it, because you might be holding the next great numismatic discovery, the next life-changing treasure, the next $43 million miracle. Thank you so much for staying with me through this entire incredible journey through the world of rare and valuable Lincoln pennies, and remember, the coin merchant is always here to bring you the most amazing, most valuable, most absolutely shocking coin stories that will change how you see the money in your pocket forever. Keep searching, keep learning, and who knows, maybe the next incredible discovery will be yours.